Good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Meet the Grantmakers panel. My name is Angela Richardson, and I am a senior trainer here at the Grantsmanship Center. And on behalf of the center, we welcome you. If this is your first time with us, we are so happy that you're able to join us today for this profound, hopefully, conversation. And if you have been with us before, then you know just how exciting these panels can be. And we welcome you back. I want to thank at this time our partners. This would not be possible without the generous support of our partners, Foundant Technologies, as well as Grant Station. Together, the three of us with the Grantsmanship Center, Foundant, and Grant Station, we all come together to provide this panel of information for all of you. So I want to thank them on behalf of the Grantsmanship Center. So with no further ado, I'd love to introduce our panel for this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Okay, so first we have Khanh Russo. Khanh is the Vice President of Policy and Innovation at the San Francisco Foundation in San Francisco, California. It is one of the largest community foundations in the United States. So welcome, Khanh. Thank you for being here. Next up, we have Tina Kuckkahn, and Tina is the managing director for the NDN Collective. They are in Rapid City, South Dakota, and their mission is about advancing Indigenous people's rights and culture, and they've been doing that since 1972. So thank you and welcome, Tina. And last but certainly not least is Michelle Heritage. Michelle is the executive director of the American Brain Foundation, and they're located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And the American Brain Foundation brings researchers and donors together on the mission for life without brain disease for all of us. So thank you all for the wonderful work that you're doing in the world. So what I'd like to do, and those of you that are watching, you have the profiles are going to be dropped in the Q&A, so you can learn more about what these grant makers do and where they're located and they're about their giving, and it is also available on our website. So to start our conversation off today, and Khanh, I'm going to start with you. I'd love for each of you to just take several minutes to introduce yourselves and your organizations to our group, our viewers today. Let us know what makes your foundation or your giving unique, what kind of foundation, and any priorities that you have, and anything you'd like to share with us to get us started and give us some context for who you are. So I'll start with you, Khanh.
Well, Angela, thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you for the Grantmakership for this opportunity to kind of share a little bit about the San Francisco Foundation. We are in our 75th year at the San Francisco Foundation, so we are really proud of that wonderful and long history of commitment to social justice. And we have at the San Francisco Foundation a North Star, and we describe it as an agenda that is about racial equity and economic opportunity. These 75 years we've served primarily 5 counties in Northern California. We affectionately call it the Bay Area. So Alameda County and Contra Costa County, Marin, San Francisco, and San Mateo. And then we have other efforts that extend across the 9 county Bay Areas. And as a community foundation, we have our own programmatic areas, but then we also work closely with individuals and corporations to advance their personal philanthropic mission and goals. We hope that our equity agenda is a bold agenda that really advances greater racial equity and economic inclusion for everyone in the Bay Area. We work on issues of systems building and power building, and really thinking about how to make sure we center community in a way that solves the issues that are closest to them. We have traditional grant making programs, of course, and then we also have program related investments. We have donor engagement, and we really think about our role in expanding civic leadership. Right? We get to be a catalyst, we get to bring folks together and be a neutral convener in a lot of spaces. Right now, the Bay Area is continually experiencing a housing crisis, and we are what we call all in on housing. So we're really thinking about how to best leverage all of our resources and expertise to solve the housing crisis while continuing to work on other issues in the community. So let me pause there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Khanh. Lots to jump into there. Next up, we will have Tina.
Well, greetings, relatives. I'll introduce myself in my Ojibwe language. First, bonjour, Nindawe Maganidug, Bidana Kwadokwe, Indigenous Kaz, Migizian Dodem Waswaganing, and Dunjaba. So I'm very happy to be here. My name is Tina Kuckkahn. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a citizen of the Lac du Flambeau Band of Lake Superior Ojibwe, so I'm from Wisconsin. And I've been the managing director at the foundation at NDN Collective since this past March, having joined NDN Collective in March of 2021. So grateful to be here to talk a little bit about NDN Collective, whose mission is to build collective Indigenous power. And we are 100% Indigenous led. And to share a bit about our foundation team's work, which is the grant making arm of NDN Collective. And one of the things that I think makes our grant making unique is that we encompass all of Turtle Island, which is also known as North America. So all of the grant making that we do is provided in the 3 colonizer languages of English, Spanish, and French, so that we're also, reducing barriers for our relatives who live in Boricain, also known as Puerto Rico, Mexico, and, the province of Quebec. So we're just trying to make sure that people have access to the resources, because we have a very distinctive approach to our grant making. We actually consider it an organizing strategy. So NDN Collective's role in building collective Indigenous power, we see grant making as a really important organizing strategy. Our advancement team works hard to liberate the wealth that was accumulated based off Indigenous lands and the removal of our people. And so that team works hard to liberate the wealth, and the grant making team then repatriates the wealth. We're repatriating it back to the people from whom it was taken. And in doing so, we are honoring the sovereignty and self-determination of our peoples. So we have a variety of what we call funding streams that provide resources for individuals, such as our Changemaker Fellowship Program, honoring leadership of Indigenous peoples throughout Turtle Island and related island nations, which would be the so-called territories of the United States. We also support the creative spirit of artists. So we have the Radical Imagination Artist Program. We have a tri-state program called Collective Abundance, where we have redefined the definition of wealth by our own Indigenous standards, talking about what does that mean to live a good life, and what does that mean as a person connected to community. So we have a Collective Abundance grant offering for people in Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. These are $25,000 to $50,000 awards. And then we also support tribal nations and Indigenous-led organizations. And we're always very clear about what we mean by Indigenous-led, which are the decision makers, honoring the fact that the people who are most impacted by the issues are in the best situated to determine how to utilize resources. So we have the Community Action Fund as well as the Community Self-Determination Program. So I'll check there.
Thank you, Tina. Also, many things that I want to just jump right in and start asking questions. So let's go ahead and go on to Michelle, and then we'll start our conversation.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. The American Brain Foundation's job is to raise money for brain disease research, because we are after a world that does not have brain disease. Nearly every human being on this planet will be affected by brain disease, whether it's themselves or someone they love and care about. Virtually none of us will escape unscathed from brain disease. And so we are really looking at funding cures and treatments to get progress on over 600 different brain diseases. Two of the things that we are really proud of that we focus on is funding early career researchers, number one. And these are folks that are coming out of their postdoc or their residency, and they're looking for the first dollars to start their research programs. And just like when you try to get that first job, it's the toughest one to get because nobody wants to give you a chance. And it's the same with researchers. And we are feeding that neuroscientist pipeline by getting these early career researchers their first grants. What I'm proud to say is we've funded almost 300 early career researchers so far to the tune of $42 million. And 98% of them have gone on to get other grants, especially those big NIH and NINDS grants. And those are the big dollars that will help us to really get some traction. The second is we function on a philosophy called cure one, cure many. And what we know with brain disease is that oftentimes there's things that connect them. And what we want to do is fund research, and we solely focus on funding research where a breakthrough in a treatment or a research piece will apply to other brain diseases. So for example, right now, we're in the middle of a neuroinflammation initiative. Why neuroinflammation? Because neuroinflammation is present as a facet in so many brain diseases, whether you're talking about autism, long COVID, a concussion, ALS, dementia, Alzheimer's. There's something there about neuroinflammation. And so we're funding researchers to really look into what is it? Is it a cause of brain disease? Is it a facet of having the disease? Is it something that if we got progress and breakthroughs on, that we could cure brain diseases or have better treatments? All these things are what we're interested in. And so our cure one, cure many is the philosophy that we function on. And so the two things we really look at are getting those early career researchers into the field and really funding brain disease research where we can get traction for many others when we find a cure or treatment in one. We also are really trying to convene. Unfortunately, in the research field and medical research, sometimes the very people that are maybe right down the road from you in a different university doing research and getting breakthroughs, you don't know about it. And the longer that researchers don't know about the work of others means that those cures cannot come to the bedside and take longer for patients to be able to avail themselves of. So we are convening together folks sometimes for the first time around these initiatives. You might have somebody from industry, neuroscientists, other kinds of researchers that are not in the neuroscience field, but adjacent fields, industry, venture capitalists, not-for-profits, and we convene them together as we're doing this research so that we've got cross-collaboration and communication, again, hoping to get those research breakthroughs to the patient's bedside quicker.
Thank you. Each of you is doing such meaningful work in the way that you're doing it. So I've started to see some of the questions, and I really want to encourage all of our viewers out there to take a look at their profiles and look at what they're specifically funding. I talk about this in our class all the time. We bring this variety of funders. Each funder doesn't fund, everyone in every place, but we bring them together so you can get a feel and a flavor of hearing from the different kinds of grant makers that are out there. So we've got research, and we've got, which I don't know if we've had a research funder on here before, so that's exciting. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to jump into this first question that I think is going to be relevant for all of you. And then I think we'll get into some of the more technical pieces around submitting grant proposals, because those are a lot of the questions that are coming up. So the first one, and this was submitted in advance, and I think it's relevant to all of you. So given the oftentimes slow pace and long nature of change, or in your case, Michelle, with research, there's changes in policy or changes in, different social justice changes, advocacy, power building work, where sometimes the impact is not within, let's say, one grant cycle. How does your foundation or your organization think about outcomes and impacts from your grantees? So on this side, when we're submitting proposals, there's always that question of like, where are you headed? And so I'd love to hear from each of you, and maybe Tina, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll just do the rotation, Tina, and then Michelle, and then Khanh, to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you. As I think about this question, I think that Native people know how to play the long game. We have been impacted by centuries of federal Indian law and policy. So we're always thinking long term, and that time is a relative construct when we're talking about making change in this world. And so at NDN Collective, we are an ecosystem comprised of different teams that are focused on creating systemic change. So, for example, our action team, they're the ones who are doing the on the ground direct actions, participating in, demonstrations, taking action, utilizing artistic energy to make expressions in the world. We have a 501c4. So when we need to make advocacy, when we are advocating for policy changes, we have utilized that vehicle in a powerful way. And then I have also shared how our grant making is an organizing strategy. And what we're doing there is we are resourcing the people who are most impacted by issues and who are in the best position to create the changes that are needed. And so what we do as a strategy in our grant making is we provide fairly unrestricted, often multi-year investments, and then just have the faith and move at the speed of trust with our grantee partners, knowing that they're the ones that are actually making the change and that we're just helping to facilitate that. So we try to make the opportunities not difficult in terms of the application processes. We're not looking for the most finely polished grant applications because we want to hear from the real people who are doing the real work. And so it's very community-based. And we keep our reporting to a minimum, but we do want to hear about their impact. We do want to hear what are the stories. We encourage people to tell us not only what the successes are, which everyone is happy to report on, but what were the challenges? What did you learn? How did you, move and shape in response to the challenges that you might have faced? And were there some unanticipated results, in response to having, receive some resources that allow them to do their good work. So those are some initial thoughts.
That's really great. I'm going to ask a quick follow-up question just because we're here. I think you brought up a really interesting point about we all like to write about our successes that we're having. Do you have a suggestion on how to best present, challenges that maybe we had? Because it does come up. We propose these wonderful programs and then reality sets in. And then we maybe don't want to tell our grant makers, but I'm always telling participants, no, that's what you want to share those too. It's part of building relationship and sharing about the real work that's happening. I'm wondering if you have a thought or suggestion on how best to do that.
Yes, because I think it's important for people to realize there are human beings on both sides of this relationship. And it's really about relationship. And the more people are able to just be honest and upfront, that helps all of us learn, right? So we are all in a position to teach and learn no matter where we're at in life. And it builds that relationship of trust and mutual respect if someone says, this is what happened and this is what we did about it. So yay, maybe somebody has learned something that would be really helpful for another grantee partner. And so when we convene them, which is primarily virtually at this time, there are wonderful lessons to share. We call them wisdom sharing circles. So we encourage folks to share the lessons learned. This is how we go about developing our what we call wise practices as opposed to best practices.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Michelle, let's move on to you. We're in this question of how do you look at, given the nature of, in your case, research, how do you look at, and how do you even measure that, or how do you present that to your grantees, and what are some of the expectations that you have there?
Absolutely. So first of all, I just want to say everything that Tina just said, ditto. I wrote down every other sentence I think you said. It's just so much wisdom. Time is a relative construct. Tina said that, and that is so important, especially when we are trying to change things at a system level. So when we're trying to change things in our culture, we're trying to change policy. It's the same with medical research. This is a long, long game. We're not expecting a researcher to come to us and say, you know what, I'm going to cure Alzheimer's. I'm going to find the cure for that any more than we would expect someone to come and say, I've written a grant and I'm going to end homelessness in this community. Because what we know is that is a long, long-term strategy. And I think the number one thing that grant makers need to have and have a lot of really communicate out to their grantees is what is reasonable progress? What is reasonable progress? The interesting thing about medical research is this. Most of the time, it doesn't yield anything that is we're going to take this and build on this and do the next thing. Most of the time, it doesn't.
Mm.
What it does do then is to say, even when it quote unquote doesn't find that we thought X was Y, instead it looks like A is B, we found that means it wasn't that thing. So it's one more piece of hay to take out of the haystack when you're looking for the needle. So even a quote unquote failure provides tremendous amounts of information that we have. So I would just say, having been on both sides of being a grantee and a grantor, now running a place that does medical disease research. Prior to this, I used to run an entire homelessness system and do all the funding for the folks doing that work. And again, I will say, we're talking about what is reasonable progress, and you have to have a very high level of tolerance if you want actual innovation. Your grantees must know that they can't hide failures, that, to Tina's point, that is a piece of learning that is just as valuable as if you've made progress.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Here in quote takes.
Yeah. Khanh, yes. Let's hear about the San Francisco Community Foundation.
I don't have much to add. I mean, I think
He's like ditto.
have really hit it out of the park. And I think what I would maybe just add is along the systems and policy work, right? We know it's long term. So I think for us, it's about building power long term. And we know that policy, particularly as it relates to winning campaigns, there are real time pressures related to that. So we really have to be thoughtful about how do we invest in campaigns in a way that continues to bolster the long-term power capacity and the building, right? Like our definition of power is our ability to, the ability and the capacity to achieve collectively agreed upon goals, right? And I think that for us, in order to do that, in order to win power, we do have to win campaigns. That's where we actually reform systems that are racist. And that's how we change rules that are racist. In California, particularly in the housing context, we had redlining as a general policy that really prevented folks from being able to get home ownership, right? Currently, for example, we are working on a campaign to lower the threshold of passing housing bonds from 66 2/3 to 55%. We believe that rule of 66 2/3 is a racist rule. It's really a rule that's preventing, communities of color and BIPOC communities from accessing housing when the community actually wants the housing, right? It's a very high threshold for a community in crisis, for a community that has 180,000 unhoused individuals in the community.
Thank you. I think I'm hearing a thread in this.
Angela, could I add one more thing that I think is
sure, absolutely.
That I would encourage your funders. I just want to say that multi-year funding for organizations is key. And to have only 1 year of funding and then to come back and try to get another year of funding, that's incredibly destabilizing when a program, especially if they're innovative, creative, and they're trying to get off the ground, if you're trying to have people with lived experience as part of the program. And that takes a lot of work. And so multi-year funding, I think, is really important to the extent that we can do that. And for grant seekers to ask for multi-year funding and to demonstrate why that's important.
Yeah. Thank you for adding that, because I was thinking from a grant seeker's perspective, listening to some of the things that you all are sharing, take the long view on this, like real change. It takes time. Asking, what did you learn, and being willing to share what you learned. So I'm always telling students, like, you're submitting a proposal, you're proposing something, doesn't mean like, and this is exactly how it's going to happen. It's like, you have a reasonable plan. You also said that, what's reasonable progress in this area? So for us as grant seekers, or those of you out there as program folks, or, leaders of your organization, we're taking on these complex challenges in many cases. So what's reasonable progress, given if it's a 1-year cycle or a 2-year cycle, and ask for multi-year. And even if the grant maker doesn't do multi-year funding, you can be thinking multi-year in your program design. So thank you all for the wisdom sharing there. borrowing Tina's or quoting Tina. Okay, so we're going to move on to this next question, and each of you kind of already touched on it a little bit. We always get this question around newer organization or newer initiatives that are out there, where if you've been around for your more well-established organization, many times it feels easier to get access to funding. But when you're a newer organization, or maybe like you mentioned it, Michelle, you're an early researcher where some of the channels aren't as open. So what advice do you have out there for more grassroots initiatives, newer organizations, maybe organizations that have smaller operating budgets or have been around 5 years or less? Let's see. We're going to start with Michelle this time.
Okay, so here's what I will tell you. What I'm looking for when I'm thinking about a less established organization is, and what I would tell grant seekers is, be clear about your unique value proposition. What you sometimes see that in organizations that are newer and smaller is that they can be more grassroots. They can be closer to where the challenge is. They're made up of people who are being directly affected by the challenge that the grant is trying to address. They may have more distributed leadership styles within the organization. They may have innovative strategies that have not been worked on before, or at least not in a particular way they've been worked on. And so that's always what I'm looking for, which is if, sometimes an organization that's gotten, bigger and have been around for a long time, they may get a little stuck in the rut of the work that they're doing. And so use this newness, your smallness, your newness, show your flexibility, show your value proposition. Don't be like, well, I know we're only new, but say, because we're new, and use that as part of what is your strength.
It's a really good point. So many times it's always like, oh, we're new, we can't get access to money. It's like, thank you for that. Khanh, how about you? How about the foundation?
I agree with what Michelle said. Yeah, I think one of the things that we look for is that you are in community with other partners and in collaboration with other partners, right? I think echoing what Tina has shared, right? We center our work in community. We believe community knows what is right for them. And I think whether you're new or old, whatever size you are, it's important for us to know that you are in community so that you're centering community and working collaboratively. And that's one of the key things that we look for. For us, being new and small doesn't concern us because, that means that you are being nimble and that you are in community and that you are activating community. We work with faith-based churches, churches and faith-based organizations. We work with lots of grassroots organizations. When we talk about systems building and advocacy and lobbying, those are the most trusted voices, right, in those communities. So like being small and new doesn't bother us at all, right? Even if you're small and new and your operating budget is $50,000, like we don't have any issues giving you a multi-year $150,000 grant, knowing that is 3 times your size. Because to Michelle's point, it's really about the ability to do that long-term planning and be able to then continue to show up in the way that reflects the community's needs and values.
Brilliant. Thank you. But just want to pick up a follow-up question because it ties into something that one of the live questions that just came up here, Khanh, which is you mentioned collaboratives. And what the question is, what do potential grant makers want to see from collaboratives? So I think we talk about building coalitions and collaboratives, and I'm wondering, what have you seen that's successful, or what from your perspective are you looking for when it comes to collaboratives?
Yeah. I don't have a great answer to that, Angela. Okay. I think that collaboratives come up pretty organically, right? And I'm looking for collaboratives that are inclusive and that are representative and that are welcoming a lot of different voices, but then also have an agenda, right? And that they have a sense of what they would hope to accomplish together. For example, we have collaboratives that are built just around the Asian American Pacific Islander experience, right? We have collaboratives that is about passing a specific ballot measure. We have collaboratives that are coming together because Contra Costa County has not had a strong power building infrastructure, and they're, leveraging an effort that they just worked on together for a campaign and continuing to stay together to ensure accountability and implementation of those policies. So it's not one thing that I'm looking for. I think it's more about how does this advance the community's needs and agenda.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And then to you, Tina, we were talking about the question of new organizations, grassroots. That's the very nature of your work. So I'm sure you have a lot to say about what you all are looking for. But also, if you want to talk about coalitions and collaboratives, I think that'd be really wonderful as well.
Yes, thank you. So interestingly, Indian Collective is also a new grassroots-based organization because we actually began in 2018. And our foundation didn't begin until 2019 as the pandemic was taking hold. My predecessor, Gabby Strong, who's the vice president of Indian Collective, built the foundation while granting out $12 million across Turtle Island during the pandemic. So my hand is always going to be perpetually off to that initial foundation team who did that amazing work. And as she likes to say, in terms of maintaining our connection to community, we're still red bandana, not red carpet. Like, we're still out there in the streets taking the action. Like, we're never going to move away from that. And therefore, those are precisely the kinds of organizations and work that we seek to support. And so many of our artists, so many of the Changemaker Fellows that are now being awarded multi-year support, they go on to create organizations because they're simply drawing to them. The energy that they're putting out into the world is making things happen. And so it begins to create this momentum, which creates organizations oftentimes, whether it's, Native-owned businesses or nonprofits, or perhaps we often will fund organizations that are so grassroots that they need a fiscal sponsor. So I just want to mention that fiscal sponsorship is something that probably some of us might consider, right? An opportunity to support growing organizations that haven't quite achieved that 501c3 designation yet from the IRS. So those are at the heart of the work that we do, as I've shared before, because we feel that those are the folks who are closest to the issues and are best situated to resolve them and address them. And finally, I just wanted to say that for those who are new, it's all about relationships in this field, right? And so you might not think that you know folks who can connect you, but challenge yourselves to think a little bit broader. If you have a board of directors or even a circle of advisors, somebody knows somebody who could introduce you, because it really does become about relationship building to continue to receive the kind of support for the work that you're looking for.
Thank you. It's almost like you read my mind. That's the perfect segue into this next question that's just coming up in the Q&A, which is all about relationship building, because it's such an important topic in our field. And so I want to have each of you speak to like what relationship from a grant seeker perspective, building relationship with grant makers, funders, and also beyond that, right, in community, but specifically in terms of funding. Khanh, I'm going to start with you this time, and I'm going to marry this with another question that's coming up in the Q&A because I think they go hand in hand. So there's relationship building, and then there's also, as a grant maker, you also research the organizations that your foundations are going to fund. So one of the questions that's coming up are how, from your perspective, how do funders, do you do site visits, conversations? Do you go to the potential grantees' websites, social media? So what's the kind of research that your foundation does that we as grant seekers need to know about? So I know that's a lot of different topics. So pick up on any of the threads that feel really relevant that you think would help our viewers out there. So Khanh, let's start with you. Relationship building and grant maker research on their potential grantees.
It's a great question. I think Tina said a little bit earlier, we're human, right? And part of that is just really building that relationship and showing up with a lot of empathy. And I think, all the things you identified, Angela, are the things that we do, because we recognize that we are the paid professional grant maker, and it is our job to understand you. And what I'd say is the way that we prioritize, the things we do prioritize is being in community. So for us, showing up to events and spaces where others, where you're showing up and getting to know you on your own terms and in your own space. I think site visits for us is a little bit like precarious because there's so much anxiety and tension, right? And pressure that's put on that. And you feel so deflated that when you get a site visit and you don't get the funding, it's very hard on the relationship part of it, like moving forward, right? So I think for us, we try to do as much work as we can on our part to do the research and checking the website, but really having conversations with you. So for us, we want to pick up the phone. It's not a bother for us that you're going to call us, right? Like, I think sometimes the volume of requests can get really big, and like those are the things that makes it sometimes challenging, but it's all about picking up the phone, having a relationship, going to have coffee, understanding your leadership style, understanding the impact that you're hoping to make, understanding how you're in community and how you're showing up in community. Those are the things that we particularly look for in, establishing and funding an organization.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Tina?
Oh, this question is making me think about, who do you hire to your organization? Because we're intentional about who we add to our NDN collective family. Are they appearing to be a self-promoter in the interview, or are they someone who's willing to put a shoulder into the work for our people? The latter are the ones who we're going to invite to join our team, so that we are looking for people who are already part of and connected to community-based work. So as we do our reviews, we're bringing some lens of knowledge, even if we're not able to represent every geography. That's where our advisory boards come into play. So for several of our funding streams, we have advisors who will help us, once our staff team does the original selections, and then we will advance, a group to our advisory boards for their review, knowing that they also bring their perspectives. We talk about the moccasin telegraph in Indian country. We are very connected, and somebody's going to know somebody. So we're doing our due diligence in terms of, asking questions about, is there a conflict of interest here? Because we also kind of joke like we're all related in Indian country, right? So how do we vet these conflicts of interest so that we maintain integrity, right? We are stewarding resources, unprecedented amounts of resources at times. And so how do we hold ourselves accountable to our own community? By surrounding ourselves with a board of directors that's based in community, with regional advisors that help us do our work. All of these things we hope, helps maintain our own integrity and level of accountability back to the people, whose mission we're all about. So I wanted to share that much. And what's really helpful too, like advice that I would say is, we do a lot of work to make some tools available for folks. So if you're a potential grantee or a grant seeker, go to the website. I'm sure all of us have webinars, frequently asked questions. If you come into a program officer with some knowledge and are able to, go a little deeper with the complexity, like you're coming in with something substantive to talk about, then, hey, we're going to pay attention. This person has done the research. This person has put something into this effort. And I think that goes a long way toward furthering relationships as well. Because it's a two-way street, right?
Yes.
It's a two-way street.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. Tina,
Can I add
Michelle.
one thing? Yeah, can I add one thing to this? So I'll just, I'll take it because I think we've gotten great information on how grant makers should conduct themselves too. And Tina starting to talk a little bit about too, grant seekers. One of the things I think that's the most important thing I would like to tell grant seekers is, and I will say on this panel, you have three probably pretty enlightened humans looking at this in a certain way. It doesn't mean that everyone you're seeking a grant from, sometimes it's a little different. So the first thing I would say to you is listen. Listen. One big mistake that I think that sometimes grant seekers come in is that they come in for a meeting and it's kind of this whole like, they're talking 90% of the time and they haven't asked, what's the priorities of this foundation or priorities of this particular project or this initiative? And why are those the priorities? And what is your thinking about why those are the priorities? And Here's my organization. How do you see my organization fitting in with your priorities at this foundation or in this initiative that you're doing? Really, I think treating the grant maker to the highest extent that you can as a partner in thought.
Mm-hmm.
These are extremely intelligent folks at all organizations that are trying to make grants and are trying to help out. Oftentimes have been on the other side of the table, have been involved with not-for-profits or fundraising and other different kinds of ways. And they're really, and I really do believe, most folks who are giving grants, they really want to help. They want to understand. They want those dollars used in the highest and best way. And they appreciate being treated as a thought partner, which is, this is what I'm thinking about. This is what my unique organization does. This is what we're really excellent at. And here's your priority over here. And I have this idea about this. What do you think about that? When you do fundraising, there's a way to do fundraising that is, it's an invitation of interest. Is this something you'd be interested in when you're working with a donor? And lastly, I'm just going to say, be really brave. You're not asking this person for their, to give you the shirt off of their back. They are there to distribute funds. I mean, even if you're talking to a personal donor, when you are helping a foundation or helping someone to give money into something that they care about, that they believe is going to make a difference and have traction, you're giving them a gift. You are giving them a gift. There's no reason to go in and not be brave, because you don't have to apologize like, well, I'm asking for this money and I hope it's not too much. No. You don't have to go in like that. Also, do not go in entitled. I know you're going to think I can't believe that there are people that have come and hit me, not at this organization, but when I was running homelessness, that would come in and say, well, these are your priorities. I don't really care about your priorities. These are my priorities, and this is why you should give me the money. And if you don't, I'm going to be pretty mad about it. It's really not a good strategy to go in kind of entitled. Partnership, and listen, and think about how you can present yourself to uniquely help that foundation, that grant maker to achieve what they're also trying to achieve. So you're working together.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you all have said so much. I feel like we could really expand this whole conversation, because I feel like I spend a lot of time with grant seekers. And one of the things that I notice is exactly what you're all speaking to, which is, as grant seekers, there's more this mentality. And listen, the structure was built this way, right? To be like, there's the wealth over there, and we're just hopefully trying to get like a breadcrumb of it. And there is, for a grant seeker, there's a dismantling of that thinking. And, I really appreciate what you said, Tina, for how your approach about, you use the phrase liberating wealth. Right. And so there's something about for all of us as grant seekers, what we're hearing from this panel, hopefully this is a takeaway, is that this is a two-way conversation. Yes, there's a foundation that is, gathering, has resources, but you are an organization that is doing the work on the ground. And so it is a collaboration. It's a relationship, a relation between two people or a group of people. And so in any kind of relationship, you're like, as you just shared, Michelle, there's thought partnership, there's honesty that's shared. And so I think the more that we can approach that in our grant seeking and even in our applications, right? I think that it's just a really strong approach, and that there's humans on both sides. And that's what I'm really hearing and taking away from what you shared. And, not all foundations are the same. I think this is a fairly unique configuration of people that we have here. And your approaches are very complementary also. So thank you for that. I just want to summarize that for you all out there. Like, there are people too. Okay, so let's see, I'm going to check my time. I just got very excited there. Okay, so I want to pick up on this question that just came in. It is on the post, like after you've submitted an application, this happens too. We get declined. We do not receive all the grant funding for every application, unfortunately, that we apply for. So beyond, applying, let's say we apply, what is the best way to continue that relationship, to figure out, what we could do next? Like, how does your organization, how do we get additional feedback? How do we take that additional feedback? And if there's any anecdote you want to share from your from your experience, I think that would really be helpful, because I think a lot of grant seekers out there, they're like, oh, they declined me, bad fit, never going to apply again. And that's not always the case. So gosh, I lost track of our order. I think we're starting with Michelle on this one.
Here's what I'd say on that one. I would encourage people 100% of the time, if you get a decline on a grant, to reach out, whether it's by email or a phone call. I will tell you, I would start with a phone call. Here's why. Because if I call Angela and she hears my voice and I say, Angela, it's Michelle Heritage from XYZ Foundation or not for profit, and we just got the information, we realized we didn't get the grant. We really would be interested in feedback from you. We'd like to do, to really get better at our grants, and we'd love information about anything that you think we could do to improve. And, even if you could just give me 15 minutes of your time, I'd love to have that conversation with you. I say call because if Angela gets that voicemail, she's going to be like, Michelle's not calling to yell at me because I didn't fund her. And then when you get on the phone, you take the feedback and say, thank you for that feedback. That makes sense. And I would say this, don't argue with Angela about her decision, and you say, oh, you didn't understand, like what I meant to write. And don't do that. Just take the feedback and realize, okay, in whatever way we presented that proposal, Angela might have misunderstood parts of it. Don't argue with her about what she did or didn't misunderstand. That's not the time. You're genuinely asking for feedback, and your job's to listen and say, anything else? Tell me more. Could you say a little bit more about that? And thank you so much. And then you take it back to the team and you guys you download it. Okay, here's what I got. Angela is going to leave with an afterglow. You can think about when you leave a conversation with someone, it can be with an afterglow, an afterburn, or an aftertaste. We're looking for afterglow, okay? Not aftertaste. And so you want that conversation just to be pure feedback. You take it, you listen, you say, thank you very much, and then you use it. And then Angela on her side is going to say, gosh, I'm really the next time ABC not-for-profit comes and applies, I'm going to really look for that. I really appreciate that phone call. It took 15 minutes of my time, and they really did want to do better.
Thank you.
So that's what I would say.
Just very, very specific. What were the three things? Afterglow, something,
Aftertaste or afterburn.
Or afterburn. That's really good. Very practical tip. Khanh, how about you? What are your thoughts around the decline?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we get regular feedback on is that our grantee partners don't understand why they were declined. And we haven't done a great job of being able to be clear about that, right? So that's something that we are working on as an institution. But I'm looking at my grant pipeline right now, and my budget is 4.5 million, and I have 9.3 million in requests. So most of the time, it's not because you're not worthy or not doing great work, right? And I think that's something that to help people kind of understand and understand. And I think as we continue to do trust-based philanthropy or practice, do those principles, I have to be in relationship with you to trust you, and then to be able to be comfortable providing, multi-year grants. Like that's part of kind of the process for transitioning to the trust-based principles sometimes, right? And that's going to be a really hard, transition for our organization and our sector, right? So I think that's something that we're still grappling with, and we don't know how to do that well yet, and we're figuring it out. But I think our goal is being able to be clear, when someone has not been invited, after I've had a conversation with you and I've decided not to fund you, then the onus is on me to be very clear about that. And it's and to reach out and still engage you as a grantee, as a potential partner in other ways, right? Funding might not be the right way that we partner now, but in the future, of course, it's something that we will want to continue to consider. And in the meantime, you are still close to the work, and you're still close to community, and you still have expertise. And if you're willing to and interested in partnering with us on that, we are always interested.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And Tina.
Yeah, first, I just want to acknowledge and thank all the colleagues here. I've just really learned a lot from each of you. This is a wonderful conversation. And we have a saying that sometimes no is simply not yet. And so we hope that that's a helpful way to think about things. We've thought about, when we have to provide a declination, are there other resources that we can help provide as well? And we've just had this conversation as of yesterday. Our foundation team brought it to all staff. We're like, here's what's happening. We had 1,200 applications for collective abundance. We can only fund about 200. We're getting some backlash. We're seeing some posts on social media. We're being confronted in community at the powwow about why didn't I get a grant? So, what do you do about that? So, got some great feedback, including, perhaps we can create a webinar that says, in this batch of applications, these are some of the challenges that we found, and make that available, because we're also feeling that with the 5 different funding streams and an intention to grant out $30 million this year, we might not be able to provide specific customized feedback to each and every person. So what can we do? And so perhaps gathering some of our findings and then sharing those back out. We've talked about, and we have done some social messaging saying, hey, we're so grateful that we had this record number of applications. We recognize we can't fund every single one. We do encourage people to try again. That no might simply mean not yet. And we're also thinking about coming at this from a cultural perspective as well. As human beings, and I've done this myself, we wait till the last minute to submit that application. But if we're asking people to bring us their visions and not their traumas, then that takes planning. And that we are thinking about, just reminding ourselves, there's no shortcuts in ceremony. Why would you shortchange your vision? So avoid those last minute things, be thoughtful about what you're doing, take advantage of all the tools that we're providing. So just trying to be really helpful and to respond in a way that feels regenerative. Because it's a very personal thing to put yourself on the line, especially, if you're applying for an individual grant. Oh, I've been rejected. Maybe the universe is telling me no. That's not necessarily the case. We can only fund 13.5%. Sometimes it's just a math problem, but we can't take these things personally because we are putting ourselves into this. So, we need to take that moment to step back, find out what this means, and then just keep going. We have an Ojibwe word for that. Yang Guamazine means take heart, be careful, but keep going.
Beautiful. I want to just highlight a couple of things that you guys said about that, just for our viewers out there. Khanh, I believe you said you're distributing 4.5 million. That's your budget, and you have currently 9.3 or 9.5 in requests. Right. So there's 4.5 to distribute and 9.3 in requests. And then Tina, you just said there were 1,200 requests and you could only fund 200. I think that's what you said. So there's the mathematics for distribution of funding. And you're so right in saying oftentimes grant seekers take it personal or like, oh, maybe it's the wrong fit. But sometimes it's just sometimes it's the math problem. And why I think that's so significant for our viewers out there is picking up on something Michelle said, which is if you have the opportunity to converse with the funder, listen to the feedback that they give, because usually inside the feedback, you'll hear the thing that maybe was not as strong in your application. So the feedback is not about trying to get the money on the after side. The feedback is about, oh, let me hear from them about what are their priorities? What could I maybe do next time? Because back to our former question, I often think that when you get a declination, this is a beautiful opportunity to build relationship with that funder, right? So utilize it. And that's back to our previous point too, of taking the long view on this whole process of seeking funding for our wonderful visions and programs. Okay, so we're almost at the top of the hour, and I want to just go around the panel. I think we're going to start with Khanh, then we'll go to Tina, and then Michelle, you'll have the last word. Of just any final thoughts, anything I didn't mention that you're like, you know what, I really want to share this thought with these grant seekers. So final thoughts, final words. Go ahead, Khanh.
Well, first of all, thank you again for the opportunity, Angela, to be in conversation with you and these incredible colleagues here. I have learned so much. I think you've been seeing me look to the side because I'm fiercely typing up all of these wonderful nuggets that I'm also learning about. And maybe that's what my final word is. Like, we are continuing trying to learn and improve, and we don't have it right. And just because, and at the San Francisco Foundation, we're very conscientious. Just because if you have the money doesn't mean that you're always right or that you have the power, right? Like, the power needs to rest in community, and we are here just to facilitate. And Michelle, like you said it a little bit earlier, right? Like, don't be apologetic. Like, you are helping us meet our mission and lift up communities, and like that is the point. So we want to be in partnership with you. We call our grantees grantee partners, and we want to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for you to do the great work of uplifting the community.
Beautiful. Thank you. Tina?
I would just like us to challenge ourselves to consider and reconsider the concept of wealth. You know, in so many tribal communities, concept of wealth is not what you have, it's what you give away. Like, and we can be thinking about that in our role as grant makers. How do we uplift the people? How do we feed the people, like, spiritually? So just remembering that we are all connected, and to consider that perhaps the concept of wealth is about living a good way of life. And what does that mean for each and every one of us? It's not about the money.
That's beautiful. Thank you. There was somebody who also asked what was, if you would repeat the word that meant, the phrase that you used about keep going just a moment ago.
Ayangwamasin. Ayangwamasin means take heart, be careful, keep going. It's an Ojibwe term.
Thank you. And Michelle.
Well, I also want to say thank you for having me, and I learned so much. I'm a little more analog. I've been taking notes on the paper. I think it's probably an age difference, Khanh, but I've learned so much today, and I feel grateful for that. And I want to say thank you for having me. It makes me, when I'm with colleagues like this, feel joyous and optimistic. There's so much that we are all working on to try to help things to be different in our world. And it's hard sometimes to stay joyous and optimistic. And when I see others that are doing this kind of work, it makes me feel that joy and optimism again. So I just want to say thank you all on this panel for that gift today. It's a very wonderful gift. So I appreciate you. I will say this, in this business, be relentless. If there's probably a tattoo that I would put on my body that I could see it every single day, it would literally say relentless is the word. Because that's really often what it takes. And I think it's similar to that concept, not quite as artful as Tina was talking about, but relentlessness is something I would just say. Don't stop.
Thank you, all of you. Yeah, I also was taking a bunch of notes also. I learned a lot from you all and from these questions. Each of these panels is so very thoughtful, and this one was no exception. And I want to thank all of the rest of you for submitting your questions in advance, and the ones that came live. We really appreciate you all taking an hour out of your day to come and be in these important conversations. So thank you, all of the panelists. And again, thank you to our sponsors, Foundant and Grant Station, for helping make these conversations possible. I want to just remind everybody that there will be a recording. We can all go back and get re-inspired by this conversation. So you will get an email with the recording, and also save the date. We do these Meet the Grantmaker panels once a quarter. So the next one is October 16th. So mark it on your calendar and you will get a reminder email, and we hope that you'll join us then. So on behalf of the Grantsmanship Center and all of our sponsors, and I'll go ahead and say the panelists as well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing out there, and we'll look to see you soon. Take care.